Ladies and gentlemen, this is Toti and welcome to another Commander Deck Tech. This time, as some of you have requested in the forums, or in the comments actually, I have made a Ghave Guru of Spores deck. To be completely honest, I wasn't 100% convinced about making this deck before. I mean, I had never played it, I saw a couple of people played it, it seemed fine, and then, well, you guys asked for it and it was kind of in the colors I like. But yeah, now after having played this deck, I have to say this is the single most powerful fair deck that I have made a deck tech for so far. I do have some other decks I haven't shown that are pretty powerful, but this is definitely in the top two, or yeah, I would say top two of my most powerful commander decks. This guy is just awesome. But let me show you instead of speaking so much. What the guy does basically, he makes a bunch of saplings. So what this deck is going to have is, let's say, a three-way kind of strategy. One of them is +1/+1 counters, the other one is saplings, and the third one is going to be sacrifice effects, because that's everything this commander provides. So he is a 5 mana, 5/5 basically. He enters the battlefield with 5 counters on him. You can pay 1 and remove a +1/+1 counter from any creature you control, not only him. And you can put a 1/1 sapling into the battlefield. And then if you sacrifice any creature, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So what this does is basically transform counters into saplings and vice versa. So these are the three, and as this has an integrated sacrifice outlet, this is one of the strategies that we are going to be focusing on as well. So let's start to take a look at the deck. In this column over here, I have the synergistic cards, and let's start off with my friend Sovereign Lord of Innistrad. So he is basically here because he is perfect in a token deck. He makes tokens, and his +1 ability is -2 ability pumps all our tokens. So he is actually pretty decent, and he is Sorin, so he's just cool. And then Elspeth makes tokens as well. And if you get to ultimate, that's pretty sweet as well. Another token maker, that's Twilight Drover. So basically when a token creature dies, you can put a +1/+1 counter on him, and then if you remove a counter, you can make 2 Flying Spirit tokens. Not saplings, but he still makes tokens. Then Awakening Zone is pretty cool. He makes a bunch of tokens and ramps you as well. Mycoloth, he can eat a lot of the tokens you have when he comes into play, and then he makes a bunch. Psychothrope Thalid, this is kind of card advantage thing, and the sacrifice outlet. So pretty good for us. He does kind of everything we want. He even makes tokens once every 3 turns. So basically you sacrifice a sapling and you draw a card. That's what he does. Where are we now then? Forgotten Ancient, obviously, now we're moving into the +1/+1 counter synergy part. And this is a card that is an auto-include, is a no-brainer. He basically gets really fast, or rather really big, really fast in these multiplayer games. And he has +1/+1 counters on him, which can be afterwards removed by Ghave to make saplings. So that's pretty cool. Then Mortician Beetle, this tiny little guy is really good with Ghave, because basically he's a sacrifice, or he's not a sacrifice outlet, rather, he's a sacrifice synergistic creature, so he gets +1/+1 counters whenever a creature is sacrificed. So basically if you have this guy and Ghave out, you can pay 1 mana to sacrifice sapling and put a +1/+1 counter on whatever, and then this guy gets a counter as well. So then you can pay another mana with Ghave, remove that counter, put another guy, rinse and repeat. So you can make a bunch of tokens really fast. Then, or rather, let's take a look at this one first. This is a similar thing. But I don't really have any vampires except the Butcher of Malakir that I'm going to show now in a while. And I think there's another one afterwards, but it is still good enough in any other creature. Because same thing, you sacrifice, You sacrifice a sapperling to put a +1/+1 counter on something, and then the equipped creature gets one as well. So kind of the same thing as Mortician Beetle. Then Mikay as a Lunarch. I mean, pretty decent with counters. He's something to do early on with your mana, which this deck doesn't have so much because the curve is relatively high. And then you can put +1/+1 counter on everything you control, especially good if you have a million sapperlings. So yeah, this guy's just good. Then this guy is pretty amazing. Basically, whenever you put a +1/1 creature, like let's say with Ghave's ability, you put +2/+2/1 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you're not only making 3/3s instead of 1/1s, you are actually making creatures with 2 +1/+1 counters on them, which you can actually remove with Ghave. So this thing is pretty amazing. Then Mentor of the Meek, pretty similar synergy with tokens. Whenever a small creature comes into play, he draws you cards, so he's pretty good. He's basically with Ghave, pay 2 mana, put a 1/1 guy in the battlefield, and then you draw a card as well, so that's pretty good. Soul Warden just gains you a bunch of life. It's decent on its own just because people play so many creatures, and no one's really going to kill this. I mean, no one's going to waste a card on the Soul Warden unless it's a Wrath or something. So this she can make you survive until the later stages of the game where you become really powerful. Then Coat of Arms, Coat of Arms. Basically, we have million 1/1 sapperlings. It's pretty cool to make a million creatures. So yeah, this can get pretty big. Then Butcher of Malakir is the first of our Grave Pact effects. This is already starting into our sacrifice synergy strategy. Basically, Grave Pact whenever you nothing, just Grave Pact. Moving on, we have the actual Grave Pact and Martyr's Bond, which is pretty much a Grave Pact for any type of permanent. So these do the same thing, as well as the Butcher of Malakir. Since Ghave has an integrated sacrifice outlet, we want to be able to use this whenever we want and make people sacrifice all their guys. So that seems pretty good. Another sacrifice outlet and something to do with your tokens, attrition. You can sacrifice one of your sapperlings to kill anything. So that's pretty good. Then Doubling Season is pretty much the all-star of the deck, and it can just win games on its own. Just with this card, when you play Ghave, he comes into play as a 10/10, because double the counters, and then, well, you have 10 counters to remove, and each one of them not only makes 2 1/1 sapperlings when you remove it, but once you sacrifice one of those 2 sapperlings, it puts 2 +1/+1 counters on Ghave, not only 1. So this card is ridiculous. This and Ghave ends the game pretty fast. Then Parallel Lives is kind of a smaller version of Doubling Season, still pretty decent. Put a bunch of sapperlings instead of just 1. Then a couple of ramp enchantments here. Mirari's Wake and Mana Reflection. I put this here because basically of this card here, Replenish. We have a good amount of enchantments here, and a lot of them are, I would say, must remove. Like, if someone doesn't kill Mirari's Wake, you normally win. Same with Mana Reflection. Same with Doubling Season in this deck. Grave Pact and Martyr Bonds get pretty annoying. So does Attrition. Like, all of these enchantments are pretty good and have to be killed. And if you play this and get 2 or 3 enchantments back, then it's good night. And there are even more enchantments that I haven't shown, like Phyrexian Arena, Pernicious Deed, those kind of things. So this thing is very good. And the last enchantment that I haven't shown here is Glare of Subdual. So just basically an opposition, which is pretty cool since you have a bunch of tokens to tap things with. Right, so here we move into our card advantage and tutor section. Another one of the enchantments I was mentioning, Phyrexian Arena, just good card advantage. Skull Clamp is really good with a bunch of 1/1s we make, or X1s. Just draws a bunch of cards. A couple of tutors, basically enchantment tutors, Enlightened Tutor and Idyllic Tutor. This, I'm not such a big fan of all of these tutors because they do cost you a draw step. Like, I don't play the Worldly Tutor here, even though I have a bunch of creatures. I don't play Vampiric Tutor. I don't play Imperial Seal here because I don't really want to lose draw steps. But there are so many powerful enchantments and enchantments that just win you the game that this thing is pretty decent here. This is kind of the same thing, only into your hand. Then Academy Rector is kind of a tutor as well. With all of our sacrifice outlets, we can pretty much sacrifice him at will, and then he fetches one of these directly into the battlefield, so he's pretty broken. Then Demonic and Grim Tutor are kind of the same thing. This is obviously much worse, but they both get whatever card we need at the moment into our hand. Green Sun Zenith, just a tutor for green creatures. Survival of the Fittest allows us to discard creatures to get more powerful creatures, like this for example, or one of the fatties we're going to see later. And then just Harmonize, draw 3 cards is always a nice one to have. Moving on, we have the ramp section. This deck, I'm going to show you after I'm done with this, just the curve of the deck. It's kind of high, like, you start, you really get going once you have like a Grave Pact that is 4 mana, or a Mirari's Wake that is 5 mana, your commander is 5 mana. You don't really have that much to do in the first couple of turns, and that's where you play your ramp cards basically. So Sol Ring obviously has to be there. 3 Visits, Nature's Lore, Sakura Tribe Elder are all kind of the same effect. Tribe Elder I chose over something else, like there's another one of these that I can't remember the name. Farseek. I chose it over that because you can ditch that to Survival of the Fittest to get whatever you want. Then on 3 you have Kodama's Reach and Cultivate. Pretty standard. Soul and Simulacrum, another creature to ditch to this and basically ramps you. It's pretty good. This thing is pretty amazing. Now that Nemesis is out online, you basically look up 2 forests, and we have a bunch of duels, so you can look them up, and they put them into the battlefield untapped. So untapped is pretty important. And then the king of ramp himself. This guy he has to be in all of your green decks. There's no way around it. Then on this side, on this column, we have some removal. Necrogenesis and Scavenging Goose are graveyard removal, which I would recommend you always have in a commander deck, because there are many decks that abuse graveyard a lot, and if you don't have a way to deal with it, you will probably die. So this exiles creatures and makes saplings. This does the same thing and makes counters, so works with both the strategies. Aura Shards is amazing, just disenchants everything all the time. This is pretty sick. We can basically make creatures almost at will, so this is pretty amazing. Acidic Slime is another one of these disenchant effects. Also kills annoying lands, and we can ditch it to Survival of the Fittest 2 if we don't need, so that's pretty good. Beast Within, instant Vindicate. I don't have the actual Vindicate because that's too expensive, but this thing is pretty much the same thing and instant, so that's pretty sick. I'm actually playing this over Maelstrom Pulse, so that gives you an idea of how good this card is. And speaking of cards that I don't have because they're too expensive, here on the ramp section, if you have something like what's it called? Mana Crypt, is it? The 0 mana one that gives you 2 mana when you tap it and you have to flip a coin every turn. That one's pretty good. So if you have it, you can play that. That's really good. Then a couple of Wraths. Austere Command, a Wrath and really flexible. Hallowed Burial is normally an all-star. You can just end people's games with this. Just removing their commander forever. Decree of Pain, Wrath, and draws you 1,000,000 cards. Condemn is useful against those annoying commanders. And then Pernicious Deed just wipes everything. Pernicious Deed is not the most exciting in our deck just because we have all these sweet enchantments that we want them to stay in play. but it's still a pretty good card. So yeah, mass removal. Then moving on a little bit for this column here, we have our just good cards. Ghave Elder and Eternal Witness are pretty much how to include in any green deck. Swiftfoot Boots, this is pretty much making it into all my decks. It's cheap protection for your commander, and it gives them haste as well. This is just a good card. I mean, yeah. Spike Weaver, he fogs every turn, and I mean, you can go pretty much infinite with him and Ghave if you need a lot of fogs. And he has counters, so he works well with that strategy, and he's pretty decent. If you have something like Genesis on your graveyard, you can pretty much turbo fog every turn, so that's decent. Then down to our fatties. This guy is pretty decent with a +1/+1 counter strategy. Vishkal, Blood Arbiter. Just 5/5 vampire flying lifelink. If you sacrifice a creature, you put that many +1/+1 counters on him for the creature's power, and then if you remove all of them, you can kill creatures. Eilish Norn is one of our two Praetors, along with Sheoldred. This guy pumps all our tokens, or this girl pumps all our tokens and kills all of their creatures, so that's pretty nice. And then Sheoldred is pretty insane, just Edict and raise or Zombify and Edict every turn. That's pretty sweet. Then Woodfall Primus is also almost an auto-include in any green deck. It's especially good in this deck because with Persist you can actually put a +1/+1 counter on it with Ghave, for example, to remove the -1/-1 counter on it. So you can actually go infinite with him, just have him come back every time he dies. On to the lands then. We have a couple of basic forests, swamps and plains, then all of our old duels, the new duels, the M10 version of the duels, and then like all the searchers we have that we can fit in here, and stuff that goes into every single commander deck, like Reflecting Pool, Command Tower, and then Urborg to kind of filter all of our colors, let's say, because we have a bunch of non-basic lands that give you value that I'm going to show in just a second. And then this one also kind of goes in every big creature deck. Then moving on to the utility lands, Bojuka Bog is a classic one, Graveyard Hate, Maze of Ith that gets annoying creatures off our back. Gaia's Cradle, especially good with all the million saplings we have and makes a million mana. Yavimaya Hollow goes in every single green deck, no exception. Volrath Stronghold, if you have it, you should put it in your black decks because it recurs creatures, kind of Genesis style. It does cost you a draw, but it's very good. Homeward Path is one that I have been putting more and more in my decks because I hate people stealing my creatures, and there are some decks that are kind of built around that. So with this, you can fetch it up with Primeval Titan and stuff like that, and it's pretty good. Then Dust Bowl. Now we can play this with Mercadian Masks, just to, if people are like us and they play a bunch of really sweet non-basic lands, then you can get them with that. Then Vault of the Archangel is especially good with all the small little tokens. You can give them all Death Touch and Lifelink, so that's good. V2 Ghazi, the City Tree, this one makes tokens. This one puts counters on people. This does the same thing. And then we have a couple of extra sacrifice outlets just to take more advantage of our sacrifice strategy in case we don't have our commander out, or if we want to sacrifice like an Academy Rex or something like that. Then some of the cards we are not playing. Ashnod's Altar, for example. With this you can make infinite mana. Like if you have, for example, Ghave, Ashnod's Altar, and the Mortician Beetle, you can sacrifice a creature for 2 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on the creature on the beetle because it dies. with 1 of the 2 mana, you can remove that counter with Ghave and put a sapling. You have 1 mana floating, and you can sacrifice that creature you just created. Mortician Beetle gets another counter, rinse and repeat. You float 1 mana in each process, and yeah, infinite mana. You can also do that with Earthcraft, but I'm gonna look up in just a sec. Here it is, another one of these cards to make infinite mana. And I'm sure there are many more of these. I don't play infinite combos because I find them super cheap, and I don't like that. But if that's something you want to go for, go ahead, you can do that. There are many ways to make infinite combos here. Another example of an infinite combo that I am not playing is if you have... so it's basically including this guy, a Sun Titan, and what's it called? Safi. There we go. This one. Safi, Eric's daughter. Yeah. So her. Basically, you sacrifice her to save your Sun Titan. Then you sacrifice your Sun Titan to put +6/+6 on this guy. The Titan comes back because of Safi's ability, getting back Safi, and you can repeat that process and make this guy an infinite creature. Yeah, also another infinite combo. Now I'm not playing because I don't like infinite combos. And I'm sure there are many more cards that I am forgetting, actually, that make infinite combos, but I don't wanna play. So if we just quickly sort this by mana cost, this is the curve. As you can see, it's pretty steep on this side, and there's not that much to do the first couple of turns. That's why where all of the ramp spells come in handy. So what you are really aiming for is maybe like in the first couple of turns you drop some ramp spells, then by turn 4 or something you drop one of your powerful 5-drop enchantments like a Mirari's Wake or a Doubling Season, and then after that after you have like a really big Ghave or a bunch of mana, you can make your Ghave and make 1,000,000 creatures. You pretty much never drop Ghave on turn 5. You want to have at least a couple mana out to get some advantage out of him. But yeah, so this deck, I'm going to show you a couple of games now. I want to say actually, I have over an 80% win rate with this deck. Seriously, this is that powerful. I only lose like 1 in 5 games or something like that. So let's take a look at the games and let's see if I can keep that up.